Right over here. They said there was a laser pointer. Oh, there you go. Okay, I don't know how to use it, so we'll just skip that. So basically, its purpose is for both testing. The big button in the middle. There you go. Okay, there you go. That's it. So basically, it's for automation, which is a word that is rather ambiguous, especially in the technical world. But what it does is it allows you to, rather than sit there and click on things on your screen, fill in forms, it allows you to do that automatically. And what that allows you to do is one of two things. You can either automate really boring tasks, you know, like checking your Facebook feed or whatever, or you can test with it. So, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today is the testing. Now, a quick thing about testing. Testing applications is rather important. And one of the most important things about it is getting it to be repeatable, and that's why automation is very important with regards to testing, because having a guy sitting in a corner doing the same thing repetitively, not very efficient, but if you have a way to get the browser to do things in a repetitive way, you have yourself pretty much the basis for running good, solid tests and decent quality assurance, for those of you who do that. So the way Selenium works is it has web drivers for each individual browser. And the idea is to try and automate things within each individual browser. So if there are any discrepancies in functionality and the way things work from one browser to the other, you could catch it. If you have a site that's supposed to be cross-browser compatible, this is obviously very useful. So obviously, I had to write the names underneath. Otherwise, putting Internet Explorer with new logo on their edge wouldn't have been as funny. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. I set most of it up already. Let's see if we can get it up. And I'm just going to give you a very quick overview. So Selenium has web drivers for, and what they call bindings for several different languages. Just real quick. The entire application is a single jar file, obviously requires Java. And they have web bindings for several different languages. They have for JavaScript, which is what I'm going to do today. As you can see, Java, C#, Ruby, Python. They do have a C# one, so I don't know if there's anybody out there who thinks that might be useful, but we won't get into that. The most common one is JavaScript. I think, as far as I can see, much of the documentation I was looking around was either JavaScript or Java. So obviously with JavaScript, since everything's asynchronous, it creates a bit of a mess, and we're going to get into that a little bit as well. But for the time being, basically, we're going to go through a couple of scenarios of automating, and then I'm going to show you how to integrate this thing with Jasmine and actually get tests with assertions that you could have reported back to you. And then if there's still time, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about Selenium Grid, which is setting up an entire network of testers on different platforms, different browsers on different platforms. For example, Chrome on Windows versus Chrome on Linux versus Chrome on Mac, so that if you were testing on a multi-platform site, you get all that in there. So, like I mentioned earlier, a couple of seconds ago, actually, so they have different drivers for each browser, and so there's the Gecko driver for Mozilla Firefox, and there's the Chrome driver. They have one for Edge, they have one for Internet Explorer, and they have some that are a little bit less conventional. HTML unit, I have no idea what that is, but they have one for what they call the Ghost driver, which I believe is Phantom.js. So yeah, there you go. And Phantom.js lets you run it headless, which is a topic for another time, but I'll just plant that seed in case anybody wants to go ahead and look it up at a later point. So let's talk a little bit more about what automation is, and I'll give you guys a little bit of an example. So if you wanted to, for example, test Amazon.com, right? So think about the steps that would entail. So you would go to Amazon.com, right? Maybe you would take Native Speaking's course first. You would do whatever it is you normally do on a site. Most, as far as I'm not very e-commercey, but I do know a lot of e-commerce goes straight to search. You find yourself a snorkel that fits you. You would add it to cart. So if you were working at Amazon, you would go through this process, a couple of million times over the course of your development to make sure it all works, to make sure people can get into their cart, to proceed to checkout. If they don't have an account, you would you would have functionality that allow you to a user to create an account. You'd want to make sure that works, the account gets set up correctly, that they can log in, etc. And so you'd want to do all the steps that I just did by clicking around. You'd want to do that automatically, and that's just that's basically the automation we're talking about over here. Not much more fancier than that. So basically, what Selenium provides for you is this jar file, which I'll show you, that allows you, that basically just spins up what we call a hub or standalone hub. And that listens for commands that come in to that hub from the different drivers. So if it was Chrome driver, it would be commands that were sent to the Chrome driver that sent to Selenium that would activate all of those actions up on the actual browser. And it's pretty simple. You basically download the jar file as is, and when you run it, it spins up a little a thing, server, hub, whatever you want to call it. That didn't work very well. Like I said, you may want to take the names. For anybody who remembers that. Okay, so now we actually have a server running. By default, the hub usually listens on port 4444. I don't know why. It might have something to do with the new Burger King commercials, but I highly doubt that, actually. So basically, for JavaScript. So for JavaScript, which is what we're going to deal with mainly, first of all, before I jump into anything else, does anybody have any questions, anything unclear?
So we can make this a little clearer?
Absolutely.
Change it.
Blow this thing up a bit.
White background.
I'm sorry?
White background.
You want a white background?
Yeah.
Is that better? Worse? Do you want it larger, smaller?
That's much better.
All right. Okay. So for JavaScript, let's jump into that a little bit. So JavaScript has a bunch of bindings for Selenium. They are called, believe it or not, Selenium WebDriver. It's a very original name thought up by somebody at Selenium, obviously, with a very large degree of creativity. Anyway, it's a node package, which makes it easy because you can just do npm install it, and it will install it magically. And we'll just go up to the node site. I didn't have time to bookmark all the sites I wanted to bookmark. I apologize. Okay, so it's pretty much just as simple as that. Install a Selenium WebDriver, brings in a package from Selenium that allows you to create scripts that will talk to your Selenium server and automate the browser. So without further ado, let me actually show you the code. You might actually be interested in more interesting in all the things I'm saying. So the single dependency here, believe it or not, is Selenium WebDriver. I don't know if, yeah, that's definitely not the same for the Selenium WebDriver itself, but it's Node, what are you going to do? So you have just this one dependency, Selenium WebDriver, and what you do is you create, is it clear enough for you guys? Yeah, there's the
Zoom and drop, I guess.
zoom in and drop. It's IntelliJ, they've got every feature except for zoom in. Mm-hmm. Is that any better?
Yeah,
Is that all right? Okay. So, hard enough for you here, because that's commented out. Okay. Okay, so basically what you do is you create a web driver builder. That's this right here, with capabilities. Now, capabilities are a set of specifications that tell Selenium where you want this to run. So in this particular case, it's going to be Firefox. You could also add an operating system. For example, Linux, Windows, Mac. I don't want to make it too complicated with this particular one. We'll get a little bit more into that if there's time with another tool that uses Selenium. And we just ran the Selenium command. We ran that jar file, and so we put up a Selenium server, a Selenium hub right here on port 4444. Now, for anyone who's curious, this multi-tab command thing is called conemu, and it's really awesome and free and portable if you're very suspicious of installing things like me. Once you build it up, you're pretty much ready to go. So it binds a couple of things. Obviously, the first thing you'll notice is there's the browser. So let's just go ahead and get rid of these pesky comments. Okay, you get the browser. So the browser is obviously, it's the web driver itself. It basically includes everything about a single browser window. That includes finding elements, sending input, sending text to input, calling events, for example, clicking on things. You can also send events that are not necessarily element specific. Like, for example, if you have a form where the enter key is bound to submit the form, you can do things like that as well. They have all kinds of other actions as well. Mouse over, mouse up, all of that standard stuff that you get, in your browser events. They even have one called drag and drop, which I discovered today. It was pretty cool. So very simply, I'm just going to go through each directive here and talk about it a little, and then we'll give it a run and we'll see it go. So browser.get is obviously we're going to go. We're going to get Amazon.com, and this is the big one, browser.findElement. Most of the time I spent learning Selenium was trying to figure out how findElement worked. So there's a couple of different options. This by that they have, I think they call it matchers or something to that effect. And you have a couple options. You can see I put one of each so I could demonstrate each one. You have expats, which are really tricky. You have IDs, not as tricky. You have names, which generally goes with input fields, and a couple other ones. You have CSS, and if you're running an Angular app, which if there's time we'll get to, they actually have some special ones like model and things like that. So let's just go through this real quick. So the first thing we're going to do is exactly what we did before. We're going to go to Amazon.com. We're going to search for a snorkel. We're going to click search. It's going to bring us to the results page. We're going to go ahead. So we're going to send some keys over to the search field right there. So we found an element by name called field keywords, which is that big search bar up on top. We sent keys to it. Snorkel, it's actually an array of characters that get split up, and each one actually gets sent separately, exactly as you would if you were typing. You wouldn't send all of them at once, unless you had some kind of magic thing I didn't know about. Please tell me about it when we're done though. So the next thing we would do is click the go button. It would send us the results page. We would go ahead and find an actual result item, and obviously a lot of this requires you to inspect the elements on each page, find those attributes that you're looking for. Sometimes it's a matter of finding one that's unique enough, excuse me, to actually pull up just that one that you want to call an event on. If you have multiple elements, there are ways to go about that. I don't have anything on that right now. Feel free to research it if you take this any further. This one as well, we're going to click the add to cart button, so I apologize, I missed one right there. So we go to that result, we find the link that takes us to the detail page, click it, click the add to cart button, click the actual cart button, proceed to checkout, create an account, and then we're going to fill out the form. Pretty simply. So you'll notice that the form fields are pretty simple. They're by name. Normally, in most cases, there's only one field with a name, a particular name. Occasionally run into issues where the designer accidentally copy pasted one of them. Not a very big deal, but you'll actually get a warning. So if you were actually running quality tests, you will notice that and be able to either fire him or tell him to fix it, preferably the second one. So I'm just going to run this real quick. And the first thing you're going to notice is a Firefox browser comes up. It goes to Amazon, puts in snorkel. There you go. We got our first result over there. No hands. Add the cart button. So I hit the cart button, proceed to checkout, go create an account, fill out information, and if I didn't already have an account, I would just click, continue on. Now, the entire setup duration, that's while that may not be the most impressive example, if you have a bit of an imagination, and sometimes even if you don't, you could actually think about where you can take this if you were doing a quality assurance test, trying to do an end-to-end user interface test. The possibilities are actually endless, believe me. You go take a look at the docs, they're endless.
Can you get by coordinates?
I believe so. I know that you could drag things to coordinates. I haven't gone there yet with regard to coordinates.
There's no unique elements.
So if there's no unique elements, it gets really tricky, and you have to try to hack it sometimes. Like, so in that case, I'm sorry? XPath.
Chrome has a feature in the DevTools. Use regular element, copy XPath.
Yeah, exactly, and that's actually very helpful because that XPath thing was probably written by the same guys.
I would recommend if you're testing your own site, you're probably better off adding like specific attributes.
True story. Actually gets you to think a little bit about that, right? Because it actually gets you to think about your naming conventions, and obviously people who program on the back end, there's a lot of talk about naming conventions and stuff. I don't know if the UI guys do the same thing, but it really does get you to think about how you name your stuff, because it's not just naming it and then you're going to go home and forget about it, and leave the system administrator to deal with it. If it's running a test, that's going to determine whether it passes or fails based on your naming conventions. It actually kind of forces you into that mindset, which is not such a bad thing.
Assuming that this is your code base that you're going through, can you just add data attributes to the elements that you want?
Exactly what he just said. You were Machavin, though. It's good.
They must work together.
I wonder if you already got all this.
Is there a way to have to write out all those steps? Is there tools that automate actually generating that code?
So there is actually. It's called Selenium IDE. I don't have an example of it now, but it's very simple. It plugs into Firefox. You press the record button, you go. As far as I know, it searches everything by XPath, but since you're copying the code out of there, it doesn't really make a difference. But yeah, you could record a set of events, go through it. If you have a dynamic DOM like EXTJS, so then it probably won't do you very, very good in that regard. Or if you build, I don't know, other kind of apps that have dynamic DOMs. React?
No way to set multiple.
I'm sorry?
Can you set multiple selectors to one item so in case things do change, it'll go through a array of different.
I'm sure you could hack it that way. I can't imagine that's a very good practice because how do you know which ones they're going to be? They don't have to be precise. For example, if you have a class list, right, you don't need all of them. You just need one class that's in there. So if, let's say, you have an active class that goes away when you hide an item, for example, so you could actually check that it has that class. One of the things you may have noticed is that it uses those, I don't know if they still call it this, but back in my day they were calling jQuery selectors. So you basically run through CSS the same way you would in any of these selectors that allow you to pull up elements, specific elements.
I think they were always called CSS selectors.
They were always called CSS selectors? I apologize.
Does this only work in browsers? Can you use on, say, desktop application?
Not that I know of. I believe that this one is specifically for browsers. I haven't seen anything native. I know that there are some tools for native, but I don't think.
Yeah, they have
I'm sorry?
Well, based on this question, it's native. Yeah,
I apologize.
Based on this question, it should theoretically have to work with something like Electron, right?
Electron is that thing you compile to native, right?
Yeah.
So once you compile it, what's left of the DOM?
No, it runs that. It runs. You need a driver to hook into it. The driver's hooked into the browser. So
I'm sure that you could.
Electron uses. No, you can bundle the driver into. The driver's controlling the browser.
Right.
It's not controlling your website. It's controlling the browser.
If you had a driver for whatever app it compiles down to, it's very possible.
That's not Electron.
I don't know for sure.
It's not, but it's still not so hard. No.
Anyway.
I'm sure you could hack it, but you create a driver for your team that expose that driver.
So this is the very basics of creating a very quick automation. You'll notice here there are no assertions. Nothing really fancy.
Can you group things like a login? You want to?
Yes, you can create functions and just bundle them all together and call them if they're very common. I don't know if anybody here has used, God, it's been like a whole month since I touched PHP, so I don't remember what it's called anymore. But they have a Codeception, that's what it is. I don't know if anyone here has used Codeception. They have ways to bundle things as well, like if you have login actions and whatever, things like that. So you can do pretty much the same thing with JavaScript functions because it's all of the bindings are in JavaScript. Excuse me. So I'm going to move on to something a little more interesting, unless anybody has any other questions.
Is there a delay feature in case you deal with like bot detection?
There is a delay feature. There's a I'll see if we can get an example of that up and running. But basically, what you can do is you can delay until something, or like time. You know.
Right.
So for certain things, like you have animations. So occasionally, I actually just encountered this on a project. But basically, you click a button, a window slides down slowly, doesn't hit an active state until it's actually done the animation. So you're going to want to do before you start to touch that thing, because it actually it throws a bit of a tantrum if you try to do something to a hidden element. So if you try to fill out a form field that's not displayed, it gives you a big error. And so you have the ability to wait until it's completely displayed, and then you can actually fill it out. There are on that topic, there are a lot of different ways of detecting attributes, whether or not things are visible, for example, pulling out data attributes and all that stuff. Okay, so the next thing I want to introduce, and this the Angular guys might get excited, but it's Angular once, don't get too excited, is Protractor. Protractor is an end-to-end test framework for Angular and Angular JS applications. Protractor runs your tests against your application, running in a real browser. Basically the same, it runs off Selenium, so they kind of borrowed it. Also, I need typing lessons, but I can still read it, as you see. Yay. Okay, so Protractor for the Angular people. The thing with Protractor is that it gives you a lot of out-of-the-box things that you would normally have to configure yourself, including hooking into Jasmine and setting up assertions and things like that. And so even if you were not using an Angular JS application, you can still feel free to use Protractor. I do, because there's the other one called WebDriver IO, and when I saw that all the things were different, I got exhausted just from looking at it, so I'm going to stick with this one. But there is another one available. It looks really good. And I think I have a list of things at the end that might be on there. So just real quick, I believe this is the Angular Seed app. And it comes, I believe that Angular 2's starter application comes with it as well. Protractor, basically what it does is it takes all of this stuff that we just talked about, binds it all together in a nice little package. You npm install Protractor, brings in all of these wonderful things, including a helper for web drivers, pull down new web drivers, update web drivers, and things like that. So one of the things that I kind of forgot to mention over here that I'm going to just show you real quick, we'll go back into the Selenium raw for a minute, are these the configurations for some of the nodes. Now, none of these are actually being used, but I just want to give you a quick preview of something real quick. Over here you have a path to a WebDriver, and if you'll notice, there's actually nowhere in here that references that anyway. And the reason is because the driver files that I'm using, those executables are actually in my path. So if you are not configuring it, if you're not using a hub, for example, and you're not putting in a bunch of configurations, you can still configure it to use a particular driver, but if you're not, all you got to do is put them in your path, and over here you have Chrome, you have Gecko, which is Firefox, and it'll find them automatically. Excuse me. So Protractor is a nifty little tool. Now, what Protractor does is it gives you a configuration file with a lot of capabilities in terms of setting up multiple capabilities. So for example, over here you have a browser named Chrome. One of the things we could do is we can make it multi-capability by adding a multi-capabilities thing, an array, where we would put in a bunch of different capabilities. Now if you do this, obviously the capabilities up here will get voided out, and it will not be recognized. So, for example, you would do Chrome, and you could also add platform if you were going to go on multiple platforms. Otherwise, I believe that the default is AMI. In this case, we'll do Windows. Let's see if we can do one more. I
How
haven't.
can we run on a different platform? On a Windows.
So that's a good question. And it really, if you're running it the way I'm running it here, it won't. There's another feature in Selenium called Selenium Grid, which basically you set up a main hub, and you configure nodes on the different platforms themselves that register to that hub. And then if you tell it to run, let's say, Chrome and Linux, it will check if any of the nodes are registered to Chrome on a Linux machine, and it will ship them off there. My apologies. Yeah, it's not going viral now. Sorry. So I'm going to do, I'll see if I can get both of these up and running real quick. I'm kind of running out of time, so let me just give you a quick demonstration of how this will run. Sorry? Apologies?
Single quote.
Okay, I'll go back for it. Oh boy. Alrighty, let's go back here. Okay, so we have our Angular C. Protractor, you install globally as well, npm install -g, or -g, or -g, whatever floats your boat. Protractor. I'm sorry? Dash global, minus global. Protractor, basically, that was very weird. I don't know what happened there. Protractor, you call protractor globally, and you pick up a protractor configuration file. So that's the one we were just looking at. Now, if everything works correctly, we should get two browsers. So you see already it says running two instances. Well, it's gone now. Like here you got Chrome, here you got Firefox, and they're going to both go, and they're not going to do anything. And the reason is because the one thing that I forgot to mention all the way in the beginning is that you need to actually run this against a listening application. It won't spin up the application unless you configure it to. I believe that in most cases it would probably be run up against QA environment, so that would probably be running. So I'll go ahead and run that just for the fun of it. My machine already has something listening on port 8000, so I have to switch the port out in case anybody is wondering about the 8080 thing. So there you go. We have ourselves a running web server. I'll give you a quick preview of what that looks like. It's the Angular starter app. Doesn't really do anything. I didn't actually touch the scenario that it's going to run, so I'll be just as surprised as you. So you can see there it's running two instances. Apologize. Running through. So you saw it ran through Firefox, ran through Chrome. You got both tests passed. So you can see right here. You got Chrome passed and Firefox. I don't know why it does that. It goes from 011 to 11. Some kind of weird binary math over there. Reach out to George, I don't remember his name, Bull, something like that. He might be able to help you out. So let's go take a look at the scenarios that we're running because they are slightly different in terms of protractor. How much time do I have left there? All right. That means we ran out of time, but keep talking. All right. Huh? All righty. Okay, so this is very simple. How many of you have used Jasmine, Mocha, anything that says it and then does things? I'm sorry? All right. So basically, it should automatically redirect to /view1, and the location hash fragment. That's the I apologize. That is the front end routing that gets done. A lot of fancy stuff. And you have your basic expects. So far, it all kind of looks the same. Now, here's a little bit of an interesting thing. So you have over here element. And what we were doing before was browser find element. What they did was they kind of took it and made it a little bit simpler. Call element's a function. Well, if you call it as a function, it's a function. Otherwise, you can do element.all. And this is what I was talking about a little earlier about if you have let's say a list, UL. You want to go through each LI and test that every single LI node is, matches specific criteria. So it allows you to do that as well, and that would be under element all. In this particular case, it's picking up by CSS using the ng-view attribute, any that have a P. And it takes the first one, it gets the text, and then it expects it to match a certain thing. And does some very, very similar things over here. Now, what's actually interesting about this, and I don't know how this works in other language bindings, but I know for sure this is definitely JavaScript. If I were to go ahead now and let's log some stuff, right? If I log out the browser's title, for example, let's see what will happen. Just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to take away one of these capabilities. Firefox. And you can see it dumped out this big mess of stuff. Now, if you're new to Node.js, this probably looks very familiar. Because every time you console log something in Node.js, it spits out a whole mess of stuff. But this is called a managed promise, and I don't know why they call it a managed promise. Very likely because of the promise that they manage. Who knows? Just spitballing here. But basically, every single thing that happens with the browser driver in JavaScript is a promise. And the reason why Protractor is special in this particular case, and I don't know if there are other tools that do this, like I mentioned, only about a month in over here, there may be some other ones, but the assertions and the things that expect, all of that, they actually accept promises, and they won't run until the promise resolves. And if you ever try to run this, just by bringing in Jasmine and trying to run some stuff, what you'll notice is everything runs, passes, then the browser spins up. So it doesn't actually wait for anything to resolve, it just shoots through everything. So Protractor, they built in to accept these promises. And so what we can actually do to get the browser's title, because everything returns out a promise, is we can say getTitle.then, and we can call a function in there. Now, when you're calling a function, it's always going to be it's going to pass whatever, if it's text, for example, it's like get title, get text from an element, it's always going to be that first argument. So I've seen people do this, and it looks really like sciencey, so let's go ahead and see if it works like that. Sorry?
It's like an emoticon.
Yeah, there you go. That was the wrong thing. It's not liking this. Well, we had a good run.
Another process running with SQL.
Probably. There it is. Yep. Thank you. It's not Linux. If you go up after you went up already, it goes up again. It doesn't start over. Okay, so it's going to run through its whole entire spiel again. And when it comes down, look at that. We actually got some tests with some text, so congratulations. That's actually the title of the page. So what that sort of illustrates is the point that everything is a promise. Everything is venable, as they call it. I'm not sure if that's a common phrase. The JavaScript guys here probably know better than I do. And so one of the things you'll notice in some cases is, I don't know if there are any here, but you will run into an issue occasionally where let's say there's an animation, so you click an element starts up, an element starts to roll down the screen, you want to check something, some assertion inside. And so one of the things you could do rather than the browser wait, you could actually just do then, and then we could call the assertion in here. So there's, for example, just real quick with this promise thing, what we can do is, because the assertions allow us to pass promises in, I'm sure I'll find it at some point here. We can actually create an assertion and check to make sure that the browser title is actually right. So what we would do is we would say expect the browser title. And I'm just going to be safe here and say to contain. And there you go. I actually lost my clipboard. Right. And we should get all tests passed, unless I did something awfully wrong, in which case it'll fail. And you can all laugh at me if you like. But we have no failures, and we actually got our another assertion in there that proved correct. Now, just real quick, I'm going to throw this in there. I hate these dots, the dot reporters. They're extremely annoying as far as I'm concerned. They don't quite tell you what's going on. And so I just put in comments in here just to give a sort of example. It allows you to put the, there are several like overrides that you can put in, and one of them is how you want to print out the results, and the other one is when you're preparing to actually run it, you can throw in the spec reporter. I did not have time to install it before I rolled in here, so let me see how fast your internet is here.
Jasmine,
Go back to it.
could have gotten a virus.
I'm sorry?
You could have gotten a virus.
Yeah, because it's Node, right? Who knows what they're putting up there? Either everyone's insulted or it is a really tough crowd. Okay, so, sorry? So actually now we will, no, don't do it again. Here you go. Okay, now we'll probably get a bit of a nicer situation in terms of reporting. Much nicer. So, tiny laptop screen. Let's see, what is the problem? Spec reporter. Okay. Probably have to require this
In the wrong project.
Honestly, I don't remember how to do it.
To require it on top?
Yeah, I gotta require it. So, I don't remember how it exports. Sitting here wondering why it's not auto-completing. That can't be good news. May have installed it in the wrong project. Well, this is fun.
Just start typing spec reporter.
I'm sorry?
Start typing.
There it is. I'm going to give it a shot anyway. If it doesn't work, we're going to call it quits on that particular
Probably
one.
get-
Point is, I'm sorry?
You have to count something equals required. Just requiring it. No.
It doesn't bring it in?
No.
No.
This is not PHP.
You should give the talk.
Where are you going spec reporter?
Doesn't look like it's resolving. All right. One more time.
Depends how they're exporting it.
Exactly, so I don't remember the precise, basically it says it and it gives you a little check mark. It's really cool. It doesn't work though, right this particular minute. But if it worked, I guarantee you it's really cool. But I'm going to skip that because I thought it would be a nice little extra. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, so sorry, Jasmine Spec Reporter. Anybody who maintains it is watching. Okay, any questions? Okay, so am I running out of here?
How much more you got?
Depends how much more I have.
Yeah, you want 10 of them?
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly, we'll do this really fast. I'm not going to go too deep into it. So obviously, I didn't really use, probably would have been more interesting if I used my slide. So this is the grid, and this is really, really interesting stuff. This is the Selenium grid. What this allows you to do, this allows you to specify a host where there will be a hub running. And what you have is you have all of these nodes that register to that hub. And the great thing about this is you put the hub on one host, you put the nodes on a bunch of other hosts. So you could have a node on a Linux machine and tell it that that particular node runs Chrome. You could have another node running on the same exact machine. So let's say that's a Linux machine. You have a Chrome node, you have an Opera node, you have a Firefox node, and if there's any sort of Tor browser, I don't know, whatever else you want on there, if you have a driver for it, you can pretty much go in here and you can get it set up to test. And they'll all register to this hub. You point the tests just toward the hub itself. The hub goes and it does all of them simultaneously. This is actually pretty cool because what you noticed before is first it brings up the Firefox window, it runs through it, brings up the Chrome window, it runs through it. Now imagine adding a couple other browsers. That could take quite a while. So if you really wanted to do a full test right before, let's say, a release, you wanted to run them quickly through if you're doing CI. You can set up
scraping.
I'm sorry?
Or if you're doing scraping.
Or if you're doing scraping. But if you're scraping, you don't need more than one node, unless you're scraping the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, you
At the same exact time.
You would set up a bunch of,
But yeah.
just a bunch of Chromes. And then,
You can set up a bunch of Chromes to run different scenarios, and they can all run in different processes. I mean, like I said, possibilities abound. You can pretty much run away with this thing, and if your boss is not very technical savvy, he might not know what you're doing. Anyway, it'll just look really cool. You might even get a raise. Who knows? But I will show you how this runs quickly. I didn't quite have time to set it up, and it's already 9:01, so I'm not going to go too far with this. But basically, what I showed you a little earlier was you have these configuration files that actually specify the capability of each particular node. So that's somewhat important. So the capabilities in this case are one node is going to run on Chrome. Max instances is 5. I'm somewhat assuming that means if you run the thing over and over and over again, it'll only spin up 5 of these. It'll only run maybe 5 in a row. I haven't tried it with that many. It is possible to, and I'll get to that in a minute. Selenium protocol is WebDriver, platform Windows, and this is the big one. You point your driver toward the actual executable driver. Now, I may have forgotten to mention this earlier, but basically on the NPM site, where I was showing you guys the Selenium WebDriver, there's actually a list of all the WebDrivers that you could go ahead and download. There's for IE, there's for Microsoft. I actually got them all to start up, and I had one running on a Vagrant box as well. I'm not going to go ahead and do that because just me plunking around here probably kill a couple of you. So I'll skip that for now. But basically what you would do is, I'll go back into the other project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, let's say, same exact Selenium. It's one jar, rules all of them because it's a jar. Those are really cool. What we're going to do is we're going to do the role, in this case, is going to be a hub. So let's create our hub. Hub falls apart because we're actually running on that port. So I'm just going to shut that down real quick. Okay, so now we have a hub running, and what you'll notice is right here on that second to last line, it says node should register to. It actually gives you a URL to actually register to. And when you set up your nodes, you're going to want to make sure your configuration files actually have that. Now, if you're using, what I was going to get to a second ago was, you have services like Browser Stack. There's one called Sauce Labs. Excuse me. And they actually have this thing set up, this hub, for all these multi-platform, multi-browser tests. And they have a remote Selenium hub running. You point all of your nodes to, they have all their nodes running. You just point your one simple configuration file or your one simple server toward that hub, to that hub, and you got whatever the capabilities that are defined over here. It will read off those capabilities, send it out to all of them. I don't have any examples. That probably would have been pretty cool, but I didn't have a chance to set up any accounts with them. So it's definitely something you could check out. Now that we have a hub, let's create a node. So again, it's the same jar for every single thing that you're trying to do. In this case, though, we're going to say the role is a node. And the node config, let's say, is, let's do Chrome. Chrome sounds nice. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our hub, grab that URL real quick. It's kind of important. We're going to go grab our Chrome config, and we're going to set that up as our hub and the hub host. Not sure if both of these are required. Now, this host is actually where I believe this is where the node is running. This is the port that the node is going to run on. So, apologies. Each of these nodes are actually going to have to run on a different port. Let's see if we can pull up, just for the fun of it, let's see if we can pull up IE. That'll definitely make a splash. Let me get some animation. The boring stuff. Stuff you hope the speaker does before he gets here. Right. So now let's go ahead and we'll register 2 nodes, let's say. See if it works, great. Otherwise we'll end here. And there you go. This node is registered to the hub and ready to use. That's pretty cool, I think. Let's do one more. See if we can get Internet Explorer. And just one more quick thing. In this case, I don't have these in my path. You don't need them in your path if you're actually specifying them in the node configuration. So again, we're going to do role as node. We're going to do the node config. We're going to go back to our conf. We're going to try and get So the next thing I'm going to do is just, it's already running there. This should do our little Amazon automation that we did earlier in those 2 browsers. Let's see if we get it to run. Nope, sorry guys. If it's a quick one, let's see if we can fix it up. Error forwarding the new session. Browser name is Firefox. Seems like it's having a panic attack about Firefox.
Chrome and IE.
Your hub
Well,
doesn't
yeah.
have it.
I'm sorry?
Your hub doesn't have Firefox registered, so it can't find that.
That is true. Thank you, sir. So we're going to do with capabilities, Chrome. With capabilities, we're going to do WebDriver. Forgot about this part. Capabilities. Oh, come on, you got to be here somewhere, IE. There it is. Old trusty IE. Well, that was rather anticlimactic, but we did bring up the web browser. So yeah, all right. Internet Explorer. Well done. Anyway, I'm going to end on that note. I can possibly set up some code if anybody's still interested to get all that stuff working. But basically, my name is Jay Kravitz. I apologize for the very short preparation time. Read my blog anyway. Might be interesting to you. I don't know. And if you're looking for some resources, this is an incomplete list because it was like 7:15 and I had to chat. So thank you guys very much.
How are you?